If one day, a neighbor you'd known for less than a year introduced you to a table full of her relatives as her boyfriend, when the two of you had never even held hands, what would you do? If that same neighbor always wore a faded denim jacket, knocked on your door at midnight clutching a pillow because a horror movie had scared her, and hung a warm carton of milk on your doorknob with a sticky note that said, "Get some sleep," whenever you worked late, would you believe she was nervous too when she said those words? And if she later told you it was all just a favor, a temporary lie to avoid an arranged blind date, but you'd already started falling for her in the middle of that chaos, would you walk away, or would you let the lie become something real? I don't know what anyone else would do. But I know that 6 months later, I knelt on that same weathered patio where the grill had once smoked and crackled, holding a silver ring in my palm, staring at Mia Hayes with tears streaming down her face, and only one thought existed in my head. From the moment she said boyfriend, there was no turning back. And that's why I have to tell you the story from the beginning. It was a September evening, the kind where dusk arrives earlier than you expect and the air carries the first bite of autumn. The charcoal in the grill popped and hissed, grease dripping onto the red-hot briquettes and sending up small puffs of gray-white smoke, carrying the scent of cumin and chili powder lazily into the darkening sky. Mia's fingers still held a skewer of chicken wings, the skin blistered and golden at the edges. She turned to me, her eyes catching the firelight like black stones dipped in water, and she blinked. "Everyone," she said, her voice pitched somewhere between casual and strangely certain, "this is my boyfriend, Lucas Grant." The beer can in my hand almost slipped. The cold aluminum pressed against my palm, sweat beading where my skin met the damp surface of the can. The chatter around us seemed to hit a mute button, 3 seconds, maybe 5, maybe longer, long enough for me to hear my own heartbeat thudding in my ears. Thump. 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 Then a woman in a checked apron broke the silence. Mrs. Hayes, Mia's mother, her face rearranging itself into that particular expression mothers reserve for sizing up a potential son-in-law, warm, expectant, and just a little bit predatory. "Oh my," she exclaimed. "Mia, you've been hiding him well." I opened my mouth, but my throat felt stuffed with a wad of overcooked rice cake, sticky and immovable. My eyes darted to Mia. She was casually rescuing the skewer of chicken wings from my hand, the one I'd been holding long enough for it to cool, and taking a bite herself, her cheeks puffing out slightly as she chewed. She swallowed and added, in a tone that was almost convincing, "It's still pretty new. I hadn't had a chance to tell you all." Her eyelashes were long, and when she looked down they cast a small fan-shaped shadow against her cheekbones, trembling slightly with the motion of her jaw. I'd known Mia for almost a year now, ever since she'd moved into the 60-square-meter apartment next to mine. She always wore that faded denim jacket, her hair pulled back in a messy low ponytail, a few strands plastered to her temples. When she smiled, a small dimple appeared on her left cheek. I'd seen her knock on my door at midnight in her pajamas, clutching a pillow, saying a horror movie had left her too scared to sleep alone. I'd seen her doing stretches in the hallway at 6 in the morning, her hair sweaty and glued to her forehead, out of breath as she called out, "Morning, neighbor." I'd even seen her crouched among the delivery boxes outside her door, pulling out a bright red dress that was clearly 2 sizes too small, holding it up against herself, frowning, and shoving it back into the package. But I'd never seen her speak like this, half guilty, half defiant, as if she were announcing an established fact that required no further discussion. "So, Lucas," Mrs. Hayes had already approached with a fresh tray of beef skewers, the oil sizzling and popping, cumin seeds clinging to the glossy surface, "what do you do for work?" "Publishing," I heard myself say, my voice dry as an unoiled machine. "I'm an editor." "An editor. A man of culture." Mrs. Hayes's eyes lit up. She pressed the skewers into my hand. "Eat up, you're too thin. Mia's never been good at taking care of anyone, you'll have to be patient with her." Mia laughed beside me, a soft pft, and nudged my elbow with hers, leaning in until I could feel the warmth of her breath against my ear. Just play along, she whispered, it's an emergency. The heat from her breath carried notes of cumin and honey. I instinctively tilted my head away, my ears burning. In my peripheral vision, she was looking up at me, her chin sharp, her silhouette soft against the fading light. Her eyes sparkled with a mischievous glint, like a cat that had just stolen a piece of fish. You. I swallowed the question that rose in my throat. The charcoal popped again, a sharp crack that made a little girl with pigtails flinch nearby. Mia's father, a distinguished man in gold-rimmed glasses, was busy soothing her. Don't be scared, Lily, he murmured. Grandpa's here. The little girl was Mia's niece. I vaguely remembered Mia mentioning that her sister's family was visiting from abroad. That explained the scale of this gathering: 2 grills set up on the patio, a long table covered with marinated meats and vegetables, a cooler full of beer and several bottles of expensive juice. A few young people sat around the table, probably Mia's cousins, and they were now studying me with a mixture of curiosity and amusement. Brother-in-law, a girl with chin-length chestnut hair, raised her grilled corn in my direction. Mia's never brought a guy home before. You must be something special. Don't call him that, Mia shot back, but there was no real bite in it. It's still early. Early? You brought him to a family barbecue and it's still early, a guy in a baseball cap chimed in. Mia, you kept this quiet. Not even a hint before today. Mia laughed and threw a cherry tomato at him, which he caught in his mouth with a grin. The atmosphere loosened, as if my awkward, stunned introduction was just a harmless little hiccup in the evening's festivities. Only I knew that a patch of sweat had soaked through my shirt, cold and sticky against my back. I bit into the beef skewer. The meat was perfectly cooked, tender on the inside, charred on the outside, cumin exploding across my tongue. But I barely tasted it. My eyes kept drifting back to Mia as she bent over a cooler, pulling out foil-wrapped mushrooms. The hem of her denim jacket rode up, revealing a sliver of pale skin at her waist. She didn't notice, too busy trading insults with her chestnut-haired cousin, her laughter ringing out like a string of tiny silver bells. This was the Mia I knew, the one who'd sit on the doorstep in the rain waiting for me to bring her forgotten keys, the one who'd make me homemade bento boxes for 3 days straight just because I'd casually complained about a delivery order, the one who'd hang a warm carton of milk on my doorknob with a note that simply said, "Sleep well," whenever I worked late. All those small, almost forgettable moments flickered through my mind like a film reel. Why was she doing this? What did emergency really mean? Was her family pressuring her that much about marriage, or was there something else I didn't know? Questions swirled on the tip of my tongue, but they were drowned out by the noise and the sizzle of the grill. Lucas, Mr. Hayes appeared beside me, a glass of beer in hand, his gaze warm but probing behind his gold-rimmed glasses. Mia's always been a handful. I hope she hasn't been too much trouble for you. Not at all, I said, standing up quickly and nearly knocking over my beer can. She's been very kind to me. Mr. Hayes smiled, fine lines crinkling at the corners of his eyes. There was a knowing quality to it, the look of a man who'd seen a few things. That's what it's all about, looking out for each other. Here, let me toast you. The cold beer slid down my throat, sharp and bracing. Mia had drifted back to my side, taking a long gulp of her juice, a smear of orange liquid clinging to the corner of her mouth, glistening in the twilight. Nice work, she murmured, just for me. My dad doesn't usually toast people he doesn't like. What the hell are you doing? I finally managed to ask her, my voice low. The firelight flickered across my face, tracing the tight line of my jaw. Mia's smile faltered for just a fraction of a second before snapping back into place. She reached for a strawberry from the table and took a bite, the sweet juice staining her lips. I'll explain later, she said, her words slightly muffled. Just help me get through tonight. Please. That, please, came out soft and light, with a slight upward tilt at the end, carrying a note of something that might have been unconscious pleading. I looked at her strawberry-stained lips, at that flicker of something raw beneath her playful eyes, and the questions I'd been holding collapsed in my chest. Never again, I heard myself say. Her eyes lit up like the brightest ember in the fire. She nodded hard, her ponytail bobbing, and turned away to tend to her niece, who had turned into a little mess of barbecue sauce. I watched her walk away, the white of her t-shirt peeking out beneath the denim jacket, her back straight and slender. Smoke rose from the grill, blurring her outline. The night deepened. String lights on the patio flickered on, casting warm pools of amber over every laughing face. Mia's cousin fired up a speaker, and upbeat pop music spilled out. Someone started humming along. I sat on a folding chair in the corner, a second beer pressed into my hand, the chill of the aluminum seeping through my fingers. Mia sat nearby with Lily on her lap. The little girl was getting sleepy, her head drooping, nodding against Mia's chest. Mia patted her back gently, humming a lullaby I didn't recognize, her voice too low for the music to carry. The light caught her lowered lashes, painting a small, quiet shadow across her cheeks. In that moment, I thought, whatever her reasons were, whatever secrets she was hiding, maybe they didn't matter as much as this. The party wound down around midnight. The air smelled of smoke and faint malt from the beer. The patio was a wreck, and Mrs. Hayes was directing the younger ones in cleanup duty. Mia handed the sleeping Lily to her sister, stretched her arms high above her head, her spine cracking softly. "Come on, neighbor," she said, coming up to me. She tilted her head, and the ends of her hair brushed my arm, carrying that mix of charcoal and shampoo. "Let me walk you home." We lived right next to each other. There was no walking home involved. But I didn't point that out. I just stood, leaving my half-empty beer on the table. The hallway light was broken, so we climbed the stairs in the dark, our footsteps echoing in the narrow space. She led the way, her silhouette outlined by the faint glow of her phone screen, the hem of her jacket swaying. At our doors, I pulled out my keys. But she didn't go into her place. Instead, she leaned back against her doorframe, looking up at me. The phone light illuminated her face, making her dark eyes gleam. She was quiet for a few seconds, and then she said, "Lucas, aren't you going to ask me why?" A draft slipped through the cracked hallway window, carrying the chill of early autumn, stirring the loose strands of hair at her temples. I gripped my keys, their teeth biting into my palm. "I was waiting for you to tell me," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. Mia dropped her gaze to the floor, scuffing her shoe against a dried patch of chewing gum stuck to the tile. She was quiet for a long time. Then she finally spoke, her voice small and muffled. "My mom set up a blind date for me next Saturday. Some overseas returnee, good family, good money." She paused, quieter still. "I don't want to go." The draft moaned through the hallway, low and mournful. My keys made a tiny clinking sound as I turned them unconsciously. I looked at the back of her bowed head, at the pale strip of skin at the nape of her neck, and I remembered the night she'd knocked on my door after a horror movie. She'd said, "Just for a little while. I won't bother you." She'd spent the whole night curled up on my couch and eaten all my eggs for breakfast the next morning. "So," I said, turning my key in the lock, the mechanism clicking softly, "I'm your shield." She looked up sharply, something that might have been panic flickering in her eyes. She opened her mouth as if to defend herself, but nothing came out. She just nodded, hard, her ponytail whipping with emotion. It was a little ridiculous. And a little heartbreaking. I pushed my door open, and the foyer light spilled out, warm and yellow. I stood aside, looking at her in the glow. "Okay," I said. "Go inside. It's cold out here." She didn't move for a second. She just stared at me, her lips parting as if she wanted to say something more. Then she smiled, that familiar, slightly triumphant smile of hers. "Good night, boyfriend," she said. She turned, fumbled with her keys, and slipped inside her own apartment. Just before the door closed, she poked her head back out and winked at me. "I'll make you breakfast tomorrow." The door clicked shut. I stood there, looking at the deep brown door, at a crooked cartoon sticker Lily had slapped on it earlier. The hallway light finally flickered on, its harsh white glow illuminating the sticker's goofy grin. I touched my own ear. It was blazing hot. From next door, I heard the faint sound of running water. She was washing up. I leaned against the wall in my foyer and closed my eyes. The crackle of the charcoal grill, Mrs. Hayes's eager questions, the cousin's cry of brother-in-law, and Mia's breath against my ear, all of it flooded back. The image that stayed was her face lifted toward mine, her voice saying, "Please." I opened my eyes and looked into my empty living room. On the coffee table sat the milk carton she'd left 2 days ago, the plastic bag now crumpled and flat. This emergency was going to be way more complicated than I'd thought. And the problem was, I wasn't sure I wanted to escape it. After my shower, my hair still dripping, my phone lit up with a message from her. Just one line, "Oh, and the blind date for Saturday is cancelled. But my mom wants you to come to dinner. The real kind. With the whole family." It was followed by a trembling cartoon emoji. I stared at the screen for a long time, a drop of water falling from my hair onto the glass and blurring the text. Outside, the city was dark and still. A car's headlights swept across my ceiling and vanished. I typed back one word, "Okay." The moment I hit send, I could have sworn I saw the shadow on the balcony next door jump. Somewhere outside, a cat yowled, the sound stretching into the quiet midnight. I set my phone on the bedside table and lay back, the ceiling again dark. But the sound of the grill's crackle and her steady voice introducing me as her boyfriend still echoed in my ears. I rolled over and buried my face in the pillow, a smile creeping across my face that I couldn't control. It was the most eventful Saturday I'd had since moving into this building. And the thing that was more alarming, or maybe more exciting, was that it seemed like this was only the beginning. The cat's yawl came twice more, then fell silent. I stared at the ceiling, the phone screen's glow fading to black, leaving only the warm circle of my bedside lamp. The trembling emoji she'd sent still danced in my mind, paired with her words about a real dinner. It made me feel a strange mix of amusement and dread. Real dinner. Meeting the parents. As the boyfriend. I pulled the covers tighter, the faint smell of grill smoke still clinging to my clothes. A soft click came from next door, she was probably heading to bed. I closed my eyes, deciding not to think about it anymore. What's done is done. At 7 the next morning, the doorbell rang. I shuffled out in my t-shirt, half asleep, and opened the door. Mia stood there in a pale pink hoodie, the hood hanging loose behind her, her hair unbound and slightly mussed, as if she'd just rolled out of bed. She carried 2 plastic bags, one with steaming soy milk and fried dough sticks, the other with cherry tomatoes and cut watermelon. "Morning," she said, shoving the bags into my chest and brushing past me inside. She kicked off her slippers and curled up on my couch, grabbing the remote and turning on the morning news. She looked up at me with a grin. "What, not used to seeing me this early? You got up at what time?" I set the bags on the coffee table and sat down beside her. 6:30, she yawned, couldn't sleep, too much to plan. I punctured the soy milk carton and took a sip. Perfect sweetness. Plan what? She crossed her legs and tossed a cherry tomato into her mouth, talking around it. "My mom said next Saturday lunch, you have to come. She's cooking her signature dishes. My sister and her family will be there. Uncle too. The whole circus." She swallowed and made a face. It's going to be a scene. So it's a tribunal. I laughed. Pretty much. She sighed, sinking back into the couch. So we have to get our stories straight. Can't slip up. Stories. She ticked them off on her fingers. How we met, how long we've known each other, who asked who out, first date, when we made it official, what we like about each other. If she asks, you'd better have answers. I couldn't help smiling at her earnest expression. The circles under her eyes were faint but visible, her lips dry from lack of sleep, but her eyes were bright. The serious look on her face was a far cry from her usual carefree self. Okay, you first, I said, tearing the fried dough in half and handing her a piece. How did we meet? She took a bite, chewing thoughtfully. The day you moved in, I was taking out the trash. You were carrying a huge box of books and nearly tripped on the loose tile in the stairwell. I caught the bottom of the box. You said thanks, we chatted a bit. Then we realized we were neighbors and exchanged contact info. That's real, right? I thought back. That was exactly how it happened. I'd been studying that heavy box of old books when the loose tile sent me stumbling. She'd come down the stairs in her slippers and caught the box's bottom. I'd looked down at her, and she'd smiled up at me, that dimple appearing on her cheek. It was burned into my memory. Then what? Who made the first move? I pressed. She swallowed, licked a trace of oil from her finger, and narrowed her eyes in thought. Let's say you pursued me. Makes me look good. What if your mom thinks that's too forward of me? Then say it just happened, naturally. She waved it off. She's not going to cross-examine us. Just stay calm and be natural. I nodded. The news anchor on TV was announcing the weather, clear skies, high of 78. Outside, sunlight was already slanting through the half-drawn curtains, painting the wooden floor in pale gold. Mia sat in that light, the drawstrings of her hoodie swaying as she spoke. Also, she said, sitting up straighter, if my mom asks about marriage plans, don't give a firm answer. Just say it depends on how things go. My sister got pushed into early marriage because my dad said next year once. They still give him grief about it. She'd ask that. Obviously. In her mind, a guy you bring home is a future son-in-law. She made an exaggerated face. So, play it by ear. Watch me. If I touch my nose, change the subject. If I cough, drink some water and play dumb. I laughed. You've got a future in acting. Of course I do, she said, puffing out her chest. I was in drama club in college. After breakfast, she cleaned up, stretched, and walked to the door to put her shoes on. Oh, Friday evening, are you free? We need to go shopping for clothes. You can't show up looking like that. I looked down at my t-shirt. The collar was, indeed, starting to stretch. What I wear is fine, I said. It's not me meeting parents. You still need to make an impression, she said, scanning me with a critical eye. That shirt is on its last legs. You need a button-down for Saturday. Fine, I said. I get off early on Fridays. It's a date, then. She opened the door, then poked her head back in. I made cookies this afternoon. I'll save you a tin. And with that, she was gone, the door clicking shut. Her footsteps faded, then the click of her own lock. I stood alone in my kitchen, the lingering scent of her shampoo still drifting through the air. I gathered the breakfast wrappers and rinsed my hands. Catching a glimpse of myself in the mirror, I noticed the corners of my mouth were tilted up in a way I couldn't quite control. The week passed in its usual rhythm, work, editing, meetings. On Wednesday night, my phone buzzed with a photo from Mia. She stood in her kitchen, a row of golden brown cookies cooling on a rack beside a glass of milk. The caption read, "Cookies are done. Come get them." I replied with a single word, "On my way." 5 minutes later, my doorbell rang. She stood there in her apron, the one with the fat cat printed on it, holding a tin of cookies. "Eat them while they're warm," she said, pushing the tin into my hands. I added a little cinnamon. "Hope you're okay with that." I lifted the lid, and a wave of sweet, spicy warmth hit me. I took a bite, crispy, crumbly, perfectly sweet with a hint of cinnamon warmth. "These are amazing," I said honestly. She leaned against the doorframe, hands tucked into the apron's pockets, her eyes curving into crescents. "I've been practicing." The last batch burned to a crisp and went straight in the trash. She glanced down at herself, where a smudge of flour dusted the fabric. "But this time, success. I'm bringing some to my mom, so she can't say I never learned anything." When she said that, her gaze drifted out the hallway window, to the dark street beyond, where streetlights filtered through the trees. Her profile in the warm light of my doorway was softer than usual, the shadow of her lashes resting on her cheekbone. "Your mom will be impressed," I said. "Impressed?" She mimicked a middle-aged woman's voice, deeper and slower. "You should be learning how to find a good man, not baking cookies." She cracked herself up, and I laughed too. But after the laughter faded, she fell quiet. She looked at me, and at the cookie tin in my hands, and was still for a few seconds. "Lucas," she said, her voice softer now, "if this whole dinner thing feels like too much, you don't have to come. I can tell my mom you had to travel for work. She won't do anything." She dropped her gaze, fingers fidgeting in the pockets of her apron. The hallway light flicked on above us, casting a harsh white glow on the crown of her head, making the whirls of her hair stand out. I swallowed the last bite of my cookie and closed the tin with a soft click. "I already told you I'd help," I said. "I'm not backing out." She looked up, and the uncertainty in her eyes softened. "Really? Really?" I looked her square in the face. "But tell me something, if your mom approves, are you off the hook? No more blind dates?" Mia blinked, then smiled, a sly, relieved smile. "If she's happy with you, she'll probably start pushing for marriage. But that's still way better than sitting across a table from some stranger. And you're not worried I might actually say yes to her?" She shot me a look, and something flickered in her expression, just for a second. "You'd have to be out of your mind. I can't get up in the morning, I can't cook, and I lose everything." "I know," I said. "You lost my keys once. Made me wait for half an hour. That was an accident." She stomped a foot, but she was laughing. "Okay, enough joking. I need a shower. You should get some rest too." She turned, and then over her shoulder added, "Oh, Friday, 4 o'clock. We're hitting the mall. And don't wear that gray shirt. It's too boring." "Fine, fine," I waved her off. She disappeared into her apartment, and the hallway fell silent. I retreated inside with my cookie tin, setting it on the kitchen table. I opened the lid and took another bite. The cinnamon warmth spread across my tongue. Outside, the autumn wind stirred, carrying the faint scent of night-blooming jasmine from someone's balcony. Friday afternoon, Mia showed up exactly at 4. She traded the hoodie for a white knit cardigan over a light blue camisole, dark jeans hugging her legs. She looked me over with a critical nod. "Not bad for today. But we're getting you something formal." We took the subway to the shopping center. She led me through the men's section with professional speed, grabbing a light blue linen button-down and a pair of khaki chinos. I changed and stepped out of the fitting room. She looked up from her phone, and her eyes stopped moving. "Okay," she said slowly, setting the phone down. She circled me, reaching out to adjust my collar, her fingers brushing my collarbone. "This one. It makes you look sharp." She turned to the salesgirl. "We'll take it." I glanced at the price tag and winced. "That's expensive." "I'm buying," she said flatly. "It's my thank you for Saturday." "No, I can't let you." "Don't argue." She shot me a look. "You're doing me a huge favor. A shirt is the least I can do." She had her phone out and scanned the payment code before I could stop her. Then she shoved the shopping bag into my hands and looped her arm through mine. "Now come on, I need to find something for myself." She picked her own dress in under 20 minutes. A mint green shift dress, falling just above her knees, with a square neckline that showed off her collarbones. When she came out of the fitting room, I completely forgot how to breathe. She always wore jeans and hoodies, but in this dress, with the soft color, she looked like a different person. Her hair seemed darker, her skin warmer. "How do I look?" She spun, the hem flaring slightly. "Beautiful," I said. The word came out before I could think. She caught my eye in the mirror and bit back a smile. "This one, then." She paid, came back, and shoved the bag into my hands. "Carry this. Good boyfriends carry their girlfriends' bags." I took the bag. She linked her arm through mine again, and I felt the warmth of her arm through the thin knit cardigan. The mall lights were soft and bright, catching the edges of her eyelashes. We walked past a huge glass window, and our reflection gazed back at us, side by side, looking for all the world like a real couple. Something in my chest shifted. On the subway ride home, the car was quiet. Mia sat beside me, her head pressed against the window. She'd been quiet for a while, and I could see her eyelids drooping. The train swaying didn't seem to bother her at all. Her breathing evened out, her lips slightly parted, her lashes painting little crescent shadows across her cheeks. I watched her. The lights outside the tunnel flicked past, painting her face in alternating shadow and glow. Her shopping bag slipped from her hand and hit the floor with a soft thud. She didn't stir. I bent to retrieve it and shifted slightly, letting her head slide from the cold glass onto my shoulder. Her hair tickled my chin, carrying a scent like flowers and clean laundry. She was so relaxed, so completely without guard, as if my shoulder was exactly where she belonged. I wished that train ride would never end. Saturday morning, 9 o'clock. Mia's text came through, "Wear the new shirt. I'll pick you up at 11. Followed by a row of bomb emojis. I typed back, "Got it." I showered, shaved, put on the light blue button-down. It fit like it was made for me. I studied myself in the mirror, sharper, more alert. But the tiny bit of tension at the corners of my eyes betrayed me. At 11 on the dot, my doorbell rang. Mia stood in the hallway in that mint green dress, her hair down and lightly curled, her face touched with soft makeup, her lips a delicate rose. She smiled, the dimple appearing. "Ready, boyfriend?" She stood on my doorstep, not pushing in like usual, a paper bag in her hand with the cookie tin inside. She looked nervous too, her fingers picking at the bag's handle. "Should I bring something for your parents?" I asked. "Flowers. Wine. The cookies are enough," she said. "She loves those. You showing up is the real gift." I locked the door, and we walked down together. Her parents' place was about a 15-minute stroll from ours, through a vegetable market and into a quiet older neighborhood. She was quiet on the walk, glancing at me now and then looking away. As we approached her building, she stopped and turned to face me. "Lucas," she said, her tone more serious than usual, "if my mom gets too nosy, don't take it personally. She just talks a lot. Her heart's in the right place." I know. Also, my sister might ask weird questions. If you don't know how to answer, just watch me. She touched her nose. Remember? Got it. She took a breath, let it out slowly, and squared her shoulders. Okay. Let's go. We climbed the stairs to the third floor. She unlocked the door, and the smell hit us immediately: rich braised pork, crispy scallion oil, sweet corn, and pork rib soup. A row of slippers sat in the foyer, and her parents were already waiting. Mrs. Hayes wore a burgundy knit top, her hair freshly styled, looking even more put together than at the barbecue. The moment she saw me, her smile burst open. "Lucas! Come in, come in. It's warm out, have a cold drink." She pressed a bottle into my hands and called over her shoulder, "Honey, Lucas is here." Mr. Hayes emerged from the kitchen in an apron, spatula in hand, giving me a nod. "Welcome, make yourself at home. Food's almost ready." Mia's cousins were there too, along with her sister Rachel, brother-in-law Daniel, and little Lily. The coffee table was covered with nuts and fruit. The TV played some variety show, but nobody was really watching. Every pair of eyes turned to me with barely disguised curiosity. Mia guided me to the sofa. Her sister slid a cup of tea toward me. "Brother-in-law," she said, drawing out the words, a teasing smile on her lips. Mia shot her a look, but didn't argue. "So, Lucas," Mrs. Hayes settled into the armchair across from us, hands clasped on her knees, leaning forward like an interviewer. "Mia tells me you work in publishing. What exactly do you do?" "I'm a literary editor," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I review submissions and develop new projects." "A literary editor, so you read a lot?" Mrs. Hayes nodded approvingly. "Mia's always been a bookworm. She has a whole bookshelf packed with them. You two must have a lot in common." "Mom," Mia cut in, "stop the interrogation. I'm just getting to know him." Mrs. Hayes gave her a dismissive wave, then turned back to me. "Don't mind me, Lucas. I'm just curious. Where are you from? Do you have siblings?" I answered, "Hometown, only child." Mrs. Hayes nodded along, her satisfaction growing with each answer. Then Mr. Hayes emerged from the kitchen with a sizzling platter of braised pork, calling everyone to the table. The table was a feast: braised pork, steamed sea bass, sweet and sour ribs, white shrimp, corn and rib soup, several vegetable dishes, cold salads. The whole family gathered, Mia and me next to each other, her sister across, Daniel holding Lily at the far end, Mr. Hayes at the head of the table with a bottle of baijiu. "Lucas, do you drink?" Mr. Hayes asked. "A little," I said. "Good man." He poured me a glass. "First toast, welcome to the family." I raised my glass, clinked with everyone, and took a sip. The liquor was sharp, burning on the way down, but the warmth spread quickly. Under the table, Mia nudged my knee with hers. I glanced over, and she was placing a piece of braised pork in my bowl, mouthing, "Eat up." The meal went smoother than I expected. Mrs. Hayes kept piling food on my plate. Mr. Hayes asked about work. Rachel and Daniel chatted about Lily's daycare adventures. The cousins bickered across the table. Lily banged her spoon on the table until her mom gently took it away. The TV murmured in the background, a talk show host's laughter occasionally rising. Halfway through, Mrs. Hayes set down her chopsticks. Her voice softened, but her eyes grew serious. "Lucas, can I ask you something? Don't take this the wrong way. But you and Mia, are you serious about each other?" I froze mid-bite. Mia's hand found the hem of my shirt under the table, gripping lightly. I glanced at her. Her face was flushed, lips tight, but her gaze didn't waver. She waited for my answer. I set down my chopsticks and met Mrs. Hayes's eyes. "Yes," I said. "I am." The word surprised me as they left my mouth. They were supposed to be a script. But as they came out, my tongue betrayed me, believing them before my brain caught up. Mia's fingers tightened, then relaxed. Mrs. Hayes's face broke into a broad smile. "Good. That's good. I'm not unreasonable. As long as you two care about each other and support each other, that's all that matters." She glanced at her husband. "Right?" Mr. Hayes nodded, adjusting his glasses. "Lucas seems like a steady young man. We trust you with our daughter." Mia dropped her head, stirring her rice with her chopsticks, her ears burning red. Rachel laughed across the table. "Wow, look at Mia blushing." Chloe joined in, and the whole table erupted in good-natured teasing. Then Lily pointed a chubby finger at me. "Uncle Lucas, eat shrimp." She grabbed a shrimp from the platter and thrust it at me, wet shell and all. The word uncle hit me somewhere in my chest. I took it, thanked her, and she grinned, showing 2 front teeth just coming in. Mia nudged me under the table again, this time letting her fingers brush my thigh, a quiet thank you. The meal lasted nearly 2 hours. Afterward, Mia helped her mom clear the dishes, while Mr. Hayes pulled me out to the balcony for chess. The balcony was lush with hanging spider plants, green and bright in the afternoon sun. The chessboard sat on a wicker table, the stones clicking crisply against the wood. Mr. Hayes was skilled, he beat me twice in a row. But he only smiled and said practice would help. Mia appeared later with a plate of honeydew melon, setting it beside the board. She leaned over to look at the game, her hair brushing my arm. "Dad, you're bullying him again, aren't you?" "I'm not bullying anyone, he just couldn't read my setup," Mr. Hayes said with a smug smile. Mia settled into the wicker chair beside me and took a piece of melon, holding it out to me. I bit into it, sweet, juicy, the juice bursting on my tongue. She took a small bite herself, chewing delicately, squinting against the afternoon light. The scent of osmanthus drifted up from the courtyard below, mingling with the honeyed melon. "Should we catch a movie this afternoon?" she asked softly, almost conspiratorially. "Yeah." "Then go," Mr. Hayes said, waving us off. Young people shouldn't waste their time with old men. Mia stood, brushed off her skirt, and winked at me. "Let's go." She went inside to say goodbye to her mom, grabbed her bag and phone. I followed, saying my goodbyes to Mr. Hayes and Mrs. Hayes, who pressed fruit and homemade pickled radishes into my hands, insisting we come back next weekend. Outside the building, the afternoon sun poured down, warm and bright. Mia tipped her face up and let out a huge breath, her shoulders sagging with relief. "I think she likes you," she said, turning to me with bright eyes. "I think your dad likes me too, even though he wiped the floor with me twice." She laughed, the sound bright and unburdened. "Come on, movie's on me." She tugged my sleeve. "Consider it a reward." We picked a thriller, but the plot dragged. About halfway through, I noticed Mia's head bobbing, her eyes fluttering. She finally gave up and rested her head against my shoulder. This time, she wasn't asleep, just leaning, her breath steady against my neck. The screen flickered, casting changing light across her closed lids and the straight line of her nose. She smelled like osmanthus, or maybe laundry detergent, or maybe just her. I didn't move. Whatever happened in the second half of that movie, I missed all of it, my attention anchored to the weight of her head on my shoulder and the occasional brush of her hair against my jaw. When the credits rolled, she sat up, blinking sleepily, embarrassed. "Did I fall asleep?" "No, just resting your eyes," I said. She stretched, the hem of her dress rising. Outside, the sky had darkened. Streetlights flickered on, stretching our shadows long and thin across the pavement. We walked side by side, our shadows merging into one. Hungry? I asked. What are you in the mood for? There's that wonton place by our building. It's been a while. We went. The shop was small but clean. The owner recognized Mia and grinned. Boyfriend? He asked. She nodded without hesitation. 2 bowls of fresh wontons arrived, steam curling upward. She blew on a spoonful of broth, sipped carefully, and closed her eyes in satisfaction. Thank you, she said, setting down the spoon. Seriously. If it weren't for you, I'd be having an awkward coffee with some overseas elite right now. I'm glad I could help. I stirred my wontons, the broth's fragrance rising. She was quiet for a moment, the steam softening her features. Then she said, very softly, Lucas, have you ever thought about what would happen if we stopped pretending? I looked up at her. She was staring into her bowl, searching for the tiniest wonton, but her ears were pink again. The warm light of the shop caught the stray hairs at her crown. My heart skipped, like a guitar string plucked unexpectedly. Would you mind if we did? I asked. She looked up, meeting my gaze. Her eyes reflected the shop's lights like 2 small stars. She bit her lip, and then the corner of her mouth curved up, the dimple appearing. No, she said. I wouldn't mind. The wonton steam rose between us. Outside, the city's night deepened, headlights streaming past. I sat across from her, watching her eat, and felt that this autumn evening was remarkably gentle. We walked home together, the streetlights stretching and shrinking our shadows. She didn't take my arm, but our knuckles brushed with each step, each touch carrying a tentative, questioning weight. At the entrance to our building, she reached out and hooked her pinky around mine. It was light as a feather. I turned my hand and gripped her fingers, palm to palm, a little damp with sweat, whose, I couldn't tell. The hallway light was on. She walked up 1 step ahead of me, her dress swaying. At our doors, she let go of my hand, turned, and jingled her keys. Same time tomorrow, she said. Same time. She opened her door, then paused, poking her head out like before. Good night, boyfriend. This time, the words had shifted, the earlier guilt replaced by a quiet, natural affection. The door closed. I stood in the hallway, staring at my own palm, where her warmth lingered. The light clicked off. In the dark, I heard my own heart, thudding loud and steady. Inside, I showered and lay down. My phone lit up, tonight's wontons were perfect. Let's go again sometime. I typed, yes. A moment later, oh, and my cousin's birthday is next weekend. She wants you to come. Are you in? I typed, yes. Then I added, as what? Her reply came fast, my boyfriend. I stared at those words, and a smile spread across my face, too big to hold back. Outside, the moon hung full and bright, silver light pooling on the floor. I rolled over, phone on the pillow. From next door, faint and muffled, I heard her laugh. She was probably looking at her phone too. Something in this autumn air had shifted, quietly and irrevocably. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that this act had long since derailed, hurtling toward an ending I hadn't expected but couldn't wait to reach. The days after that moved faster than I'd imagined. At Mia's cousin's birthday party, I was officially introduced as the brother-in-law to more of her extended family. When someone asked when we were getting married, Mia laughed it off, but her hand found mine under the table, warm and sure. We fell into a rhythm. Dinners together, grocery runs, lazy evenings on her couch. Her slippers lived by my door, my jacket hung on her rack. One night she worked late, and I left the light on for her. She came home, stood in my doorway with red-rimmed eyes, said, "Lucas, you're wonderful," gave me a quick, fierce hug, and fled to her own apartment to shower. That hug lasted only a few seconds, but its warmth lingered all night. One Friday evening, we sat on her balcony, looking at the stars. Autumn nights were clear and high, a few bright stars scattered across deep blue. She wore her old denim jacket, a mug of hot cocoa in her hands, leaning against my shoulder. "Lucas," she said, her voice scattered by the night breeze, "is this real? Are we really a couple?" I rested my chin on her hair. "What do you think?" She was quiet for a moment. Then she tilted her face up to look at me. The moonlight caught her eyes, gleaming and soft. "I think it's real," she said. I bent and kissed her forehead, light as a whisper. Her lashes fluttered like startled butterfly wings, and then she smiled, the dimple back. "No take-backs," she murmured, burying her face in the curve of my neck. I held her tight. The night wind carried the scent of osmanthus from the courtyard below. The distant city lights spread like a warm ocean, and her breath was steady against my skin. I thought back to that barbecue night, the shock of her introduction, the chaos, the confusion. I never could have imagined that an emergency would bring me here. But here she was. Real. Warm. Mine. Somewhere outside, the cat called out again. Even its cries sounded softer now. We stayed out on the balcony too long, and both caught colds. The next morning, I sneezed a dozen times. Mia was no better, her voice thick and nasal as she leaned against her doorframe, wrapped in a blanket, only half her face visible. "Lucas," as she croaked, "I feel terrible." I made her ginger tea and brought it over. She was curled on her couch, surrounded by tissues, the remote nearby, some variety show playing on mute. She took a sip and wrinkled her nose. "Too spicy." "Drink it anyway," I said, sitting beside her, pressing my palm to her forehead. "No fever. Just a chill. Stay home today. Rest." She nodded meekly and sipped at the tea. Then she set the cup down and leaned her head against my shoulder, blanket tied around her, a cat wrapping itself in a cocoon. "Lucas," she said, her voice muffled, "you're too good to me. What if I can't live without you?" I looked down at the pale nape of her neck, a few stray hairs clinging to the skin. The morning sun came through the window, illuminating dust motes drifting lazily in the air. "Then don't," I said. She didn't answer, just rubbed her forehead against my shoulder. I pulled the blanket up higher, covering her ears. Pigeons landed on the window ledge across the way, cooing. The apartment was quiet except for the murmur of the TV. I called in sick to stay with her. At noon, I made congee with pickled vegetables from the store. She ate 2 bowls. She slept for most of the afternoon, and I sat in the living room scrolling through manuscripts. Every now and then I'd hear her turn over, or hear her mumble my name in her sleep. I'd answer, and she'd settle down again. Toward evening, she woke, her hair a wild mess, sleep still clinging to her eyes. She padded out wrapped in the blanket, stood in front of me for a moment, then bent down and pressed a kiss to the top of my head. "Thank you," she said. And then she shuffled into the kitchen, opened the fridge, and started poking around, as if that kiss had just been the last beam of light before sunset. But I knew it wasn't. I watched her crouched in front of the fridge, the blanket slipping off one shoulder, and I went over, pulled it back up, and reached past her for a couple of eggs. "Let me make you some steamed egg custard." She looked up at me from her crouch, her eyes still puffy from sleep, her lips dry, but bright. "Okay," she said, smiling. The egg custard came out silky and warm. She sat at the table, took a small spoonful, blew on it, and closed her eyes in contentment. It was the same expression the stray cat downstairs made when someone gave it canned food. That night we watched 2 comedies. She laughed so hard the blanket fell to the floor more than once. By the time the credits rolled on the second film, it was nearly 11. She walked me to the door, reluctant, clutching the handle. "Come back tomorrow," she said. "Go to sleep. You too." She pulled the door closed, then opened it a crack to add, "Don't forget your cold medicine. I heard you sneeze earlier." The door clicked shut. I stood in the hallway, touching the spot on my head where she'd kissed me. It still felt warm. The light flicked on and off, and I went back inside, found the cold medicine, and took a tablet. And so the days slipped by, smooth and unhurried. Our dynamic shifted from neighbors helping each other to a couple in a relationship, the change as natural as water spilling from a glass. On weekends we went to the market together. She'd stand at the fish stall for 10 minutes, debating, then pull out her phone to look up recipes and drag me over to the scallion display. On Wednesday nights, when she worked late, I'd meet her at the subway exit. She'd spot me from across the street and run toward me, her backpack bouncing. When it rained, she'd text me to bring in the laundry from her balcony. When her fridge was empty, she'd walk straight into mine, haul out borrowing some milk, and walk out before I could answer. Mrs. Hayes called sometimes to ask if we were coming for dinner. Mia always put it on speaker, looking at me, mouthing, "You want to go?" I'd nod, she'd say yes. I'd shake my head, she'd make an excuse. Once, Mrs. Hayes asked on the phone, "How's Lucas treating you?" Mia glanced at me, the corner of her mouth curling up, and said, "Better than you treat Dad." I laughed out loud. She made a face at me. Through the phone, Mrs. Hayes's laughter crackled, warm and distant. In mid-October, the publishing house organized a weekend trip to a historic town, a team-building getaway. We could bring a guest. I signed up with a +1 in the group chat. My colleagues had heard I was seeing someone, but they hadn't met her. They were clamoring to see the mystery girl. When I told Mia, she was sprawled on her couch eating an apple. She thought about it. Are they nice? Good people. Just a little rowdy. Then I'd better make a good impression. She tossed the apple core in the trash and clapped her hands. Can't have you losing face. On the day of the trip, I met her downstairs at 6:30 a.m. She wore a white knit sweater, a light gray pleated skirt, her hair braided to one side, a small pearl clip holding the braid. I stared at her for a long moment. She spun in a little circle, skirt lifting. "How do I look?" "Amazing," I said. "Then, really amazing." She smiled and linked her arm through mine as we boarded the tour bus. My colleagues fell silent for a beat when they saw her. Then Kevin, my loudest coworker, broke the silence. "Holy crap, Lucas, you've been holding out on us." He stood up and waved at Mia. "Hi, I'm Kevin. I work with Lucas. He talks about you all the time." Mia smiled politely, the dimple appearing. "What does he say?" "That you're a great cook," Kevin started, but I shot him a look, and he corrected course. "I mean, that you're wonderful, kind, everything great." Mia glanced at me, her eyes dancing. She sat down beside me and leaned in, whispering, "Since when do you say I'm a great cook? You told me the fish I made last time was too salty." "I was encouraging you," I said. She pinched my arm lightly, just enough to feel. The bus started moving, and the scenery outside slid backward. Mia leaned back, pulling out 2 bottles of water and a bag of snacks, placing them on the small tray. She shared an earbud with me. A folk song played, acoustic guitar, bright and clean, like the autumn morning itself. The town was small. Narrow cobblestone streets lined with old wooden buildings. Sunlight fell through the eaves in patchy gold. My colleagues spread out, and Mia and I walked slowly behind, her hand in my jacket pocket, her fingers cool. We passed a stall where an old man painted sugar art on a slab. He used a brass ladle to drizzle melted sugar, twisting and turning his wrist to form a butterfly. Mia watched for a long moment. I scanned the QR code and bought it, handing it to her. She held it up to the light, the sugar amber and translucent, fine veins visible. "It's beautiful," she said. "I almost don't want to eat it." "It'll melt if you wait," I said. She hesitated, then took a small bite, the wing cracking with a faint crunch. She chewed, and her words were muffled, "Sweet." Another bite, and the butterfly was missing half a wing. I reached over, took the remaining piece, and popped it into my mouth before she could stop me. The maltose hit my tongue, thick, sweet, almost cloying. But something about it felt right. She looked at me, her cheeks puffing slightly. She seemed to want to say something, but swallowed it. She turned away and looked at the old buildings, but her fingers in my pocket squeezed tighter. At noon, we ate at a restaurant by the river. My colleagues had a few drinks, the mood warm. Kevin raised his glass and approached Mia. "Here's to you, sister-in-law. This guy, Lucas, he's always been quiet. We honestly thought he'd be alone forever. But since he met you, he's changed, smiling all the time, editing faster, everything." Mia raised her teacup and clinked his glass. "So if he's editing faster," she said, "that means your team's numbers are up too, right?" Kevin blinked, then burst out laughing. "She's right. I'll drink to that. You're our lucky charm." Under the table, Mia patted my hand. I turned my palm and held hers. In the afternoon, we explored a small museum and an old stage. As dusk fell and the bus took us back, Mia was too tired to stay awake. She leaned on my shoulder and slept through the drive. The streetlights outside flicked on one by one, painting orange streaks across her sleeping face. Her lashes trembled faintly. Kevin mouthed to me across the aisle, "Good for you, man." I just smiled and said nothing. Back in the city, it was almost 8. We stopped at the barbecue stall near our building for a quick bite, then walked home slowly. The wind had turned cool, and she tucked my hand into her jacket pocket. We walked close, our steps unconsciously sinking. "Lucas," she said, stopping under a streetlight, tilting her face up to look at me. The light caught her eyes, 2 small flames. "I had such a great time today." "So did I." She rose on her toes and pressed her lips against mine, quick, light as a breeze, carrying a faint residue of maltose. Before she could pull away, I caught her waist and pulled her back. Her pupils widened, lashes fluttering, and then she closed her eyes. This kiss lasted longer. Deeper. Autumn wind poured through the alley, stirring the stray hair at her temples and the hem of my jacket. Far off, a car passed, the sound muffled. Her hands slipped out of the jacket pocket and settled on my arms, her fingers tightening. When we parted, her breath was shaky, her face hidden in the dark, but her ears were blazing red. She kicked at a pebble on the ground, watching it bounce and disappear into a drain. "Let's go home," she murmured. "Home," I said, and took her hand. At her door, she turned, hesitated. She smiled, said good night, and closed the door. I stood for a long moment, touching my lips, where the warmth still lingered. The light flicked on and off. I went back to my place, showered, lay in bed. Her message appeared, "Today was wonderful. Thanks for bringing me." I typed, "I'll bring you everywhere." She replied with a spinning bunny emoji. I stared at the cartoon rabbit spinning on my screen, my smile impossible to hide. Then, in the last week of October, something happened. I was at my desk, reviewing a manuscript, when Mia called. She rarely called during work hours, so I picked up immediately. Her voice was low and anxious. Lucas, my mom called. That blind date guy, the one I dodged, his family is related to one of my mom's friends. The friend was talking to my mom today, and apparently, he's heard I have a boyfriend but still wants to meet me. Just as friends, they said. My mom asked if I was open to it, I said no, and she got annoyed. She said he's so sincere, what's the harm in meeting once? She paused for a breath. I think she's getting suspicious. She said, how come I never heard about him before, and suddenly you have a boyfriend? I told her we were friends first and only got together recently. She said that's a little too convenient. I set down my pen and leaned back. What do you want to do? I don't know, she said, frustration bleeding through. Part of me wants to just come clean. Come clean about what? That we were faking it and then it turned real. There was a pause on the line. Then she said softly, it is real now, isn't it? I heard my own heartbeat in the quiet of the office. Yes, I said. It's real. She was quiet again. When she spoke, some of the tension had eased. Then I'm not scared. Even if she finds out the old story, she can't deny what we are now. And she's already met you and liked you. What's she going to do, take it back? I laughed. You're taking this in stride. What else can I do? Her voice lightened. Anyway. It's you for the rest of my life. She can take it or leave it. She said it so casually, like she was commenting on the weather. But the words hit me square in the chest. The rest of my life, she'd said it so naturally, as if it required no thought. I clutched the phone, looking out the window at the late autumn sun, golden leaves spiraling to the ground. Yeah, I said. It's me. She gave a soft laugh, low and intimate. Then let's go have dinner with them this weekend. Clear the air. If she yells at me, you have to defend me. I've got your back. After I hung up, I sat staring into space for a long time. Kevin passed by my desk and tapped the divider. Everything okay? You're all red. I touched my face. It was warm. Fine, I said. It's warm in here. Late October and it's warm, Kevin said, wiggling his eyebrows. Sure. I'll leave you to your warmth. Before we went to Mia's parents' place that weekend, we sat on a bench outside our building for a long time, reviewing our talking points. There wasn't much to plan, just the core truth, we'd become a real couple, and the fake start was old history. Mia rehearsed it out loud until she got bored with her own voice. Finally, she stood, brushed off her pants, and said, let's go. Rip the Band-Aid off. Mrs. Hayes's smile at the door was thinner than usual. The warmth was there, but it didn't reach her eyes. The meal was subdued. Mr. Hayes poured me a drink as usual, but Mrs. Hayes stayed quiet, only occasionally putting food in my bowl with a soft, eat more. Under the table, Mia held my hand, her palm sweaty. Halfway through, Mrs. Hayes set down her chopsticks. She looked at Mia, not angry but studying. Mia, be honest. What's really going on with you and Lucas? Aunt Zhang said that overseas returnee was still asking about you last month, said you were single. That doesn't match up. Mia's face flushed. She bit her lip, then raised her chin, her voice tight but steady. Okay, I'll tell you the truth. At first, I asked Lucas to pretend to be my boyfriend. Because I didn't want to go on that date. But later. She glanced at me. Her fingers squeezed mine. Later, we became real. So whatever the start was, he's my real boyfriend now. And he's the only one I want. The room fell silent. Even the hum of the refrigerator was deafening. Mrs. Hayes's expression flickered, surprise, then confusion, then something more layered. Mr. Hayes cleared his throat. I knew it, he said quietly. The way Lucas looked that night at the barbecue, he didn't seem like he was in on it. Mrs. Hayes turned to him. You knew. I watched him, Mr. Hayes said, adjusting his glasses. The way he looked at her. That wasn't an act. I didn't say anything. Mrs. Hayes's face shifted through a series of emotions. Finally, she let out a long sigh and turned to me. Lucas, be honest. When Mia asked you to play along, did you want to? No, I said honestly. Her face stiffened. But I couldn't stand to see her struggling. And as we spent more time together, I paused. I started to really care about her. That's the truth. When you asked me if I was serious about her that day at lunch, I wasn't acting anymore. I meant it. Mrs. Hayes studied me for a long time. The sharpness in her gaze slowly softened. She turned to Mia, her expression caught somewhere between exasperated and relieved. She reached out and flicked Mia's forehead. You're still the same, always scheming. You risked dragging Lucas into this, and what if he'd said no? Mia winced, but a smile was already forming. He wouldn't. How do you know? Because I know. Mia said it with absolute certainty. Her peripheral glance at me was full of bright, unshakable confidence. Mrs. Hayes shook her head, half laughing, half sighing. She picked up her chopsticks and put a piece of braised pork in my bowl. All right. Since you're real now, I'll let the past slide. But Lucas, if she ever pulls a stunt like this again, you tell me. I'll handle her. 12. Mia squawked. Mom. Whose side are you on? The side of reason, Mrs. Hayes said, taking a sip of her wine, a real smile finally settling on her face. Mr. Hayes laughed and served himself more vegetables. Lily reached for Mia's hair, but Rachel grabbed her hand. The tension broke, a taut thread finally cut, the room falling back into its familiar, comfortable noise. That night, as we left, Mrs. Hayes held my hand at the door and spoke to me at length. How I'd have to be patient with Mia. How she was raised to be a bit much, but her heart was pure. How I should take care of her. I nodded at each point, and she patted my hand, her eyes wet with the particular glow of a mother's love. Mia waited at the stairwell. When I appeared, she studied my face, then took my hand. Did she give you a hard time? No. She told me to take care of you. Mia smiled softly. We walked down together, the lights in the stairwell flicking off behind us and on ahead of us. When we stepped out, the autumn wind hit our faces, thick with the scent of osmanthus. Finally, Mia said, taking a deep breath. No more secrets. Now you can be the official son-in-law in front of my mom. And what about in front of you? She stopped, turning to face me. The streetlight wrapped her in a circle of warm gold. Her eyes glowed, her smile wide, the dimple deep. In front of me, she said, rising on her tiptoes to whisper in my ear, you're the one I can't live without. The night wind scattered the osmanthus scent across the street. Somewhere, through an open window, a song drifted out, faint and indistinct. But I heard my own heartbeat. I heard her breathing. And I heard the quiet, gentle echo of this autumn street. I kissed her. This time, she didn't close her eyes. Those bright eyes looked into mine from inches away, lashes trembling, then curving into two happy crescents. In the scent of osmanthus, I heard myself say, Mia. Let's get married. She pulled back half a step, eyes wide, like a match suddenly struck. 2 heartbeats of silence. Then she laughed, the sound breaking the night, startling a pigeon off the opposite roof. Seriously, she said. You're proposing without a ring. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small silver band. It was something I'd bought at a trinket shop in that historic town, a simple circle with a faint vine pattern etched into it. I'd bought it on a whim, not sure why, and it had stayed in my pocket ever since. I slid it onto her left ring finger. It fit perfectly. She looked down at it. She looked up at me. And then she launched herself at me, arms around my neck, her full weight pressing against me. The moon was bright. The osmanthus was sweet. Her arms were strong around me. And somewhere, from that open window, the song came clearer now. Old lyrics, carried on the wind, in the sea of people, I found you, and everything changed. I held her tighter. This whole thing, this story that started at a grill, had found its ending on an autumn night, and it was the perfect one.